Let's create a mean stack application from scratch, but focusing on the security part, right, of creating logging in, using password, encrypting passwords, and so on and so forth. So we're going to be using the Angular's CLI to create a brand new project, and we'll call it Angular and Passport Security. Okay. So while that's happening, I'm going to open it up with my IDE, and I believe it's under NEU, and then under webdev, under lectures, and there it is. So the CLI is setting up our environment. While that's happening, I'm going to create a server, for a node.js server, and we'll put that in a server.js. Right, so here's where we're going to implement our server. And while that's still going on, we're going to install a couple of libraries here. So we'll do an npm install express. Right, that's the library that we use for creating web services and servers in general. And let's install that. And that's going to add a dependency here in our package JSON. Of the latest version of Express. Okay. Is that done? Okay, it's done. So we can create our very simple server. I don't remember how to, so I'm just going to go fetch from Express.js their boilerplate. So it's the latest version of Express, and down here they have a boilerplate piece of code that sets up a very simple server. There it is. And just to test to see that this server is indeed ready to go, I'm going to create it in a running configuration. And apparently I can't yet, since WebStorm is still parsing all my files. Almost done. There it is. Okay, now I should be able to create a new node configuration, and I should be able to just run my server.js. Right, and actually let's give it a better name than just unnamed, so we'll call this the server. And now I should be able to just run this, so I'll just run it. And now I should have something listening at localhost 3000. Which just says hello world, which is this hello world over here. Everybody okay? All right, so I have my little server up and running. Very good. I don't really need this anymore, so I'm just going to throw it away. All right, I think it's my CLI is done, so I have my Angular app all set. So I should be able to just run it from the command line from here. I should be able to just run it saying ng serve. Oh, no, that's not it. Ng serve. So this starts the Angular CLI environment that allows us to debug and compile all our TypeScript into JavaScript, and it deploys it in its own Node.js instance, right, running at 4200. So we have two servers, right? We have our server, which is going to be our data server, right? That's going to connect to a database. It's going to go fetch data from Mongo. Whereas the 4200 is only a development server that allows us to do development on the Angular side. Yes? And we're going to have these two folks talking to one another. So that's done. So we should be able to now hit that other server that's running at 4200. And it has the boilerplate Angular for startup application. Right? We're going to blow most of this away. All right, so now that we have our environment up and running, we can start actually doing our work. So for security, to implement security, login, and passport support, we're going to need a couple of libraries. Two of them are not specific to not necessarily specific to security, but they're useful for being able to parse cookies from the incoming requests that come in from the client. The client is going to be sending cookies, passing some state information, right? So that it identifies itself. So let's install these two from the command line. I guess we could do it from here. Where are we? We're not in the right place. Lectures. There we go. So let's install those two: the cookie parser and the express state session. So that's installing it. Okay, while that's going, we can start getting ready for the other two steps. We're going to need to load these two libraries in our server. Right, so in our server.js, in our very simple server.js, we're going to load those two libraries which we just installed, right, the cookie parser and the express session. So now we have those two. Now we can start thinking about something specific on using passport login, right? And for that, we're going to need to install yet another library. Before we do that, we're going to need to configure these two libraries we just loaded, right? First, we're going to need to tell Express to use the cookie parser we just loaded, and also we're configuring the session, and we're telling it to encrypt any cookies that go back and forth between the client and the server, to encrypt them so that if anybody's listening and anybody intercepts that cookie, it'll be meaningless to them, right? It can only be opened up and interpreted by the server, right? So it's any cookies that go back and forth that are going to be signed by the server using any text that you choose, right? As long as it's the same text, it'll use that to be able to decipher the cookie back and forth. Okay. Obviously, you would not want to encode it hard coded like this, like I'm doing here. Instead, you would want to set it up as a environment variable, right? Either on Heroku, you would, in your environment variables, you can set it up there, or if you're on a PC, it would be an environment variable from the console, right? Or if you're on a Mac, you would use your bash profile. You would set up your environments variable there, okay? But I'm lazy, so instead I'm gonna choose a string, any string, doesn't matter. And the reason you want to put it here because this is going to end up in source control, right? And anybody who has access to that source control can see that text. Okay. All right, so we have that. Now our Express server knows how to parse the cookies from the HTTP request headers, and the session knows how to map that cookie to a session variable, right? For different users. So if I come in and I'm accessing the server, I would have a different cookie from you accessing the same server, right? And so that we would have a different session. So if I have something in my shopping cart, it would not be the same items as your shopping cart, right? We would have separate sessions. All right, so we have that. Let's now install some security related libraries. First, we'll install Passport. Okay, and then we will install Passport local. So Passport, as we mentioned a couple of weeks ago, right, has various strategies that allow you to implement several mechanisms for authenticating folks. We're going to be looking at the local right now. Okay. So while that's deploying, let's now load up those libraries that we need. Once we have configured the cookie parser and the session, we're also going to load the Passport library and then configure Passport itself. Here we're telling Passport to initialize itself, right? So this is going to add several features to the to Express, right? So Express is receiving HTTP requests between the client and the server, right? And so it's going to add a couple features. For instance, is going to add to the request object, is going to add the currently logged in user, for instance, right? It's going to add several functions that allow you to log out, right, or to log in, or authenticate to see if the person is who's whatever session is coming in, whether that session has been authenticated already. Okay, so it's going to add all that support, and this one is initializing passport and telling it that we want to use the session, right, that has been configured earlier. So it needs to be done in this order. First, we configure the low-level session support, and then we tell passport use that low-level session support that has been already configured. Okay, so it needs to be in that order. If you first do this and then the session, it won't work. Right? You'll run through several hours of aggravation. Why is this not working? Right? It's just the order matters. Okay. All right. So we have that. Let's keep going. Since we have the client running on one server, one Node.js server listening at port 4200, and we have our server, our Node.js, the data server, running on 3000, the browser interprets that as cross-domain violation, security violation, right? That it's saying, wait a minute, your Angular client is running on 4200, but you're trying to access data in 3000, right? And it considers that to be two completely different domains, right? And the browser stops you and says, no, you can't do that, right? To enable this, we need to tell our server, our Node.js server, that it's okay, right? We're going to whitelist a couple of domains. We're going to say, hey, if the request comes from this particular domain, let it through, okay? So to do that, we're going to copy this over here, and we're going to configure. I'm going to say, hey, Node.js, when you start, okay, the client, right? The way it works is that the browser, when you're trying to do cross-domain access, right? It used to be that it would just deny you and says, nope, you can't do that. Right? This was early on when JavaScript had just come out, and everybody was concerned that you were downloading JavaScript from a server, right? And it says, okay, well, what should be allowed? What should that executable that I'm downloading be allowed to do, right? And folks and browsers to alleviate some of the concerns, it says, well, no, it's going to be this code that you're downloading from the server. It's going to be very restricted. It's not going to have access to your file system. It's going to have very limited access to any of the resources on your machine, even though it's running on your machine or it's running on the browser. It's going to be contained within the walls of that browser. Okay, that was a little bit too restricted. It says, well, what about if that JavaScript wants to go back to the server and ask for information like a network connection, right? So that was kind of scary. It says, what do you mean? I'm going to download code, and that code is going to start talking to other folks and maybe sending private information. So it says, well, no, it's not going to talk to anyone, but how about can it talk to the server that it came down from, right? If it was downloaded from one server, perhaps you already trust that server, right? Perhaps you already trust that site. So perhaps we should allow that JavaScript to talk back to the original domain that it came from, okay? So that was okay, right? So we will allow that, but we disallow the fact of allowing JavaScript to talk to other domains, okay? Because that was considered to say, well, that makes no sense that that I'm downloading something from one server, but then starts talking to other servers. That was kind of scary. So we disallow that. Today, it's actually very common, right? That you download from all sorts of places, right? And the APIs are very ubiquitous that allow you to access data from anywhere, right? That you want to be able to allow that. So the protocol was added. A new header was added called the access control allow origin. Okay, where new servers, I think Tomcat 7 and on, okay, and all the many other servers starting to support the fact that instead of the browser just completely denying their JavaScripts to go and do some cross-domain scripting, instead the browser would ask the server, right, the server that they want to try access is it okay, right, if this script talks to you, right? And the server would say yes, no, all right? So here we're configuring saying that specifically we want to allow queries that come from 4200, right? From that particular domain. Right? So because we have our client running on localhost 4200, right? That's where Angular is running, and it's trying to access 3000. So here we have the 3000, right? Our server is listing on 3000, saying that it is okay to access if somebody comes from localhost 4200. Make sense? Right? We could open up to everybody and just say star. Because I don't care who comes to me. I'm okay with access from anybody. Right? Come and give me your request, and and that's typically what services like Yelp or Google or Facebook, that they open up their APIs, right? That they want anybody to be able to integrate with their services, right? So they have this kind of configuration. They allow access from anybody, right? Instead of whitelisting and saying only from these domains, they say, hey, anybody, right? They use other authentication mechanisms such as tokens, API keys, and things like that, right? And two-phase authentication. But here we're saying specifically from 4200, we're allowing queries from there. The other thing is that typically we can specify a very granularly, which HTTP methods are we going to allow, right? Typically the default is that yes, I will allow queries from anybody, but the default is that you can only read operations. Right? And that's common, right? I'm accessing Google, it's a search query, and I'm doing a read, right? And then I can download JSON data from Google or Yelp or anybody, right? But less common is that they will allow you to post data. That's less common, right? Typically, Google will not allow you to post just data. Some services do. For instance, Flickr, for instance, allows you to post new images, for instance, or Twitter will allow you to post new tweets, right? And you generate a post, right? And you send your new tweet and whatnot, and you can update your tweet, or change, or delete, or so on and so forth, right? So anyway, so this is what this says. That we're configuring this, allowing all these, and also we're saying we're configuring that hey, these communications are going to start sending you secure cookies that are going to be used for authenticating, right? That are going to carry some secure information that is meant to maintain the state and the identity of the user who's currently logged in. Okay, so we're turning that on. So allow credentials true. Okay, so there's a couple things that are happening here, right? So we're turning all those things on to support the fact that we are authenticating and it's session based, right? Okay. All right, so we have that. All right, so from the client side, we're going to turn on a couple of things. We're also going to keep track of the currently logged in user on the client, although it's not really necessary. But we're going to be doing mostly for convenience purposes on the client side, right? We want to keep track of who's currently logged in, so we could do some DOM manipulation. Maybe we want to hide a couple of things if you're not logged in. Maybe we want to show something if you're an administrator, but not show it if you're not an administrator. So we want to do some DOM manipulation based on whether the current what is the current state of the currently logged in user, right? So to do this, we're gonna create a convenience client service, which is basically just a singleton, almost like a global variable, right? That anybody who wants to know who's currently logged in, they can come here. Right? We're going to store it in this one single place. Anybody who wants to know any information about the currently logged in user can come to this one service. Right? So let's create that. Let's on the client side, let's create let's create a directory for services. So services, and in here we'll create our first service. So it's a TypeScript, and this is going to be a, what is it called? Shared service. So shared .service.client.ts. and yes. All right, so in here we're going to implement our service. So this is export class shared service without the client. And the only thing we're going to store here is the current user, and it's going to be an empty object, right? Again, it's just kind of like a global place for us to put in the currently logged in user. We're also going to make it injectable. There we go. And I'd like to be able to inject this, and any service that needs to be injected needs to be declared in the modules as a provider. So this is shared service. There it is. Okay. All right, so we got our shared service, and we declared it in the app module. We did that. Very good. All right, so let's start. Let's start first implementing registration. Right. So for registration, we like to be able to register somebody new, and as they register, we want to make sure that they're logged in. Right, so let's do that real quick. Let's first start with the service that generates the request for the service. Or perhaps, do we have a server? Maybe we want to do the server first. And REST components, implement server. I think we should start the server first. Right? Let's start from the server first, and let's walk our way backwards to the client side. Right? Otherwise, the client's not going to have anybody to call. Right? There's nobody on the server side. So let's do that. Let's do the client side first. So let's do that. Let's create first a on the server side. Let's create a directory where we can create our server side, and let's create a JavaScript file here. We'll call it app.js. Let's create the schema for this, the schema for the kernel for the user. Let's create here a directory where we can put all models. So this is models, and we create the user here. So the user dot schema dot server.js, and we can just paste it in there, right? I don't believe we have the mongoose library, so let's install that. Let's install that from the terminal. No, actually no. From here maybe. We'll do npm install mongoose and save. So that is going to install the server side mongoose library that allows us to talk to a database. All right, so while that is deploying, let's go back to the schema. So the schema, let's keep it simple, just username and password. Maybe first name into first name and last name. And looking forward a little bit, we're also going to add a role. Okay, and this role, for instance, we'd like to be able to specify that you're an admin role, you're a student role, or faculty role, or even better, this could be an array of strings. Right? Maybe you have multiple roles, right? And maybe we want to specify that this can't be just any string. It should be a string from, for instance, we could be a little more specific and say that it is a string, but from the following enumerated data type, the only valid values for this string are that it could be an admin, maybe it could be a faculty, maybe it could be a student. And so those are the only valid values for that string. Okay. All right. So now we have the schema. It's been exported. We can create the model for this now. And let's create a JavaScript file. This would be user.model.server, server.js. Actually, in that schema, we can actually provide a default value. We can say the type is string, and it's going to have a default, maybe faculty. By default, you're faculty. All right. All right, so let's create a model out of this. So we can have var. We can load the schema. Right, so this would be a user schema, and this will require the user schema. There it is. And we'll also need mongoose. Require mongoose. Oops. And now that we have mongoose, we can start creating the model itself. So this will be var user model. It'll be mongoose and model, and we'll call it user model. And it's going to be validated against the user schema. Okay. Just to get us started, let's create a function. Let's export the model. We'll say module.exports equal user model. And we're going to tie a couple functions to this. Let's see which one we're going to go first. Let's first create the user. Let's do that one first. And let's implement create user. There it is. And let's do find user by ID too. Let's do those two. And they're implemented down here, so let's copy that. So there we go. So we have the beginnings of a user model, right? That allows you to create and find user by ID. All right, awesome. Let's we have that. We'll need a service to expose these. All right, so let's create a service for this. Let's see. Let's create a service. So it will be services. The service is going to expose our model to the world, right? So let's create a user service for this. So some of this I hope is just a review, right? But again, the focus is only security, right? Let's see. Let's say user.service.server.js, for this we're going to put it in an exports in a function that's going to take as argument an instance of the express library that we're going to pass it in the arguments. And for this, we're going to create several endpoints, one for creating the users, one for finding a user, and I believe I might have that already. Let's load the model first. There's our model. Okay. What else should we do here? Let's see. Do I have register? Right. We have register is going to allow us to register a user. Okay. So the app here is going to allow us to register the user, and we're probably going to need here login as well at some point, right? So probably going to need a login as well, but we'll do that a little later. Login. Okay. All right. So that's going to be the we're going to fill in the blanks here. Now these two are going to need they're going to be using the passport library, right, to authenticate the user. Right. So let's configure the passport library. So to do that, let's load the passport library. We can load it here. We're also going to load the we're going to configure the way that the data that goes back and forth, the cookie that goes back and forth between the client and the server is parsed from the cookie, and how is it going to be interpreted? In particular, it's going to be interpreted as a user instance, right? The only real information that we're going to need from that user instance is really the ID. We can always reinstantiate the user if we just have the ID, right? But it's going to have actually more information than just the ID, and that communication is secure because we're signing, right? We're encrypting that cookie that goes back and forth between the client and the server. So even if it gets intercepted, it's really useless to anybody but the server. So let's configure passport, the serializer and the deserializer, and functions down here. We have the serializer. Here we're saying that we're saying what do we want to put in the cookie. Okay, the passport is going to keep track of the currently logged in user, and if somebody's logged in, right, it's going to pass us the user information here as part of the life cycle. We can put breakpoints here to see when actually those things happen, right? When it comes back and forth between the client and the server, which makes it a little interesting on, and we'll see that at every HTTP request from the client, right, it's going to call the serialize and deserialize, right? It's going to parse things from the cookie. And for the deserializer, the deserializer is the other way around. It's this is receiving information from the client, right? And from where we can presumably parse the ID information from that user. Okay, which in our particular case we're using it to reinstantiate the user object and make them again reconstituted on the server side and making them the currently logged in user. Right, if we do find that ID. Also, if the cookie that comes back hasn't yet timed out, for instance, if it times out, that deserializer will fail. Right, so all that is built into the mechanism. Passport checks to see how long the cookie has been around, if it has timed out, if it's no longer valid. All that is maintained by Passport. All right, so we have that. So let's focus on register now. So what do we want to do in register? So in register, what we want to do, right? What we want to do in register, okay? We're going to. Oops, sorry, is that it? I copied the wrong thing. Register. There we go. So presumably from the client, right? We're gonna post from a registration. Input field, right, a form. We're going to fill in username and password, and it's going to come in here as a post. There it is, as a post, and we're going to parse out the username and password from here. We're going to see, and presumably we would check to see if that user actually exists or not, right? If it already exists, we're not going to allow them to be created again. But for now, we're not going to do any of that validation. We're just going to focus on the bare minimums for registering somebody. It's going to create the user. Once it creates the user, we're going to log them in. This login function was not originally there. That login function was added by Passport. Right? When we initialize Passport in our server here, when we initialize it, we're telling Passport add all these additional functions in there, right? In this particular case, it's going to make the user the currently logged in user, so that when it gets serialized back to the client, that cookie is going to be updated, right? So that if it was about to time out, it gets refreshed. It's a brand new cookie. You're still logged in, right? So that you don't time out. So all that magic is done by the login function. All right, I think we're done by on the server side. I think the only other thing that we need to do is actually connect to a database. We don't have a database connected. Yes.
So where does that secret matching happen? Where like unpackages what it received from the
So the deserialize and the serialize and deserialize.
the secret.
Oh, the secret, we did that on the server.
That's the server side, right?
Yeah, this is all server side. Yes. Yeah. So what Passport is going to do is that in this serialize, before sending it back to the client, the cookie that gets generated, all the headers and the entire HTTP request gets jumbled up, right? So that even if somebody reads the request, it's listening in between. The cookie itself is meaningless to them, right? So
the secret's like the encryption.
the encryption, yes, it'll sign it, right? And only somebody who knows the secret would be able to reconstitute the cookie. Yeah. So these two functions are doing that magic, right? So serialize does it on the way out, right, when it sends it to the client, and deserialize does it on the way in from the client, right? So that on the client it's always encrypted, right? And serialize does that. And here is where we have a chance to say, what do we want to put in the cookie? Right? We have a chance to put, so whatever object we put in here, that's what goes in the cookie. Okay. and presumably that's what we get back from the cookie. Right? So whatever we put in, that's what we get back in the cookie. And again, the only real thing we need is the ID. Right? But we're putting in a whole bunch of other things in there as well. All right, so the only other thing that we need to do is that we actually need to connect to a database. So we don't have that. So let's connect to a database, and we'll do that. Let's see, we can do that on app.js. App.js is going to be our entry point to this server-side application, and it's going to have it'll be just a function that takes as argument an instance of the Express library, and it'll use it to pass it along to the service. Okay, so the service that we just created can be loaded in here. We can say require the service we just created. So this is services and user service. There it is. And we're going to pass in the instance of Express. Okay, and we're going to create an instance of our database. We didn't do that, right? I don't believe we did. So I don't remember how to do that, so I'm going to go look it up. And Mongoose JS, and this first two lines is really what we need. So this instantiates, loads the Mongoose library, and is going to use the database that we want to use, any database we choose. In this case, let's use Angular Passport Security. How's that? That's the database we're going to use, right, for this lecture. Right, we'll call it the same as the project name, right? All right, that's it. And the very last thing we need to do is this entry point of app.js. We need to instantiate it from our server.js, because this is where everything starts, right? Our server.js. So let's require that app.js, and I think we put it on the server, and it's app.js, and we're going to pass it an instance of the Express library. Right? We're going to pass it as an argument, which app.js is going to pass it to the server, to the service, right? And the service is going to use it to register a couple of posts. Make sense? Right? Starts a server. App, and then the service. All right, I think we're done on the server side. On the client side, we need to register, right? We need to send a request that we want to register, right? So to do that, let's see, what do? We need a service to generate that. We need a service that actually generates that post. Right, so to do that, we're going to create a user service. This is on the client side, right? We did everything on the server. Now we're on the client side. We're working backwards, right? We're implementing the server, everything we need on the server, and then we go on to the client. All right, so I'm done with the server. I'm going to close that, and now I go back to the client and create a couple of services here. So not JavaScript. We'll create the user service here. This would be user.service.client.ts. Right, so this is the mirror image of the server, of the service on the server side, right? That is expecting a post. From where? From this guy. This is the one who's going to generate the post, right? Right, because remember, our client is running on a browser that downloaded this code halfway across the world, whereas our server is running the other halfway across the world. Right? These are two machines that are talking to one another through HTTP post. Okay. All right. So let's create the service here. I'm just gonna copy it from here and paste that in there. It's injectable. Let's see. What do we have here? It's injectable. Yep. We need the HTTP, request options, response, very good. Here's our register and our login. And right now, let's focus on register. And we'll do login a little later. Okay. So from register, let's see, what do we want to do in register? So on register, we want to generate that post. right? So there it is. We're going to generate a post to our client, our server. Our server is running on 3000. Yes, it's running on 3000, and indeed it is expecting a post on API register. Let's make sure that's true. Yes, it is expecting a post on register. Right, so we're going to generate that post. We're going to use the HTTP service, which here we have injected into the constructor, so we can use HTTP here. This dot HTTP. We're going to generate a post to this URL, and what are we going to post? We're going to post credentials. We're going to create a little object here that is going to keep track of our credentials, and we're going to send it as part of the post. All right? Okay. And then we're just going to wait for the response. We're going to wait for the response. So on earlier versions of Angular, we use promises, and promises allow you to do one asynchronous call at a time and handle one response at a time. In Angular 4, it's a little more powerful. You can actually have an array, right, of multiple things happening, right? And what map does is that allow you to iterate over all the responses that are coming, right? If it's a collection of responses that are coming back from the server. In this case, we only have one response, right? So this map is really just mapping over an array of one. Okay, we're just getting one single response. So this response is of type response. And we're not going to really do anything with this response. We're just going to just pass it along to whoever wants it. We're just going to return the response, but parse as JSON. Okay? All right. I think we're pretty much done with register. We just need to be able to call it, right? And we're going to call it from a component, right? And a form that gets filled out. But before we can use the service, we need to remember to declare it as a provider. So here's our providers. There it is, and we're going to load it. There we go. Okay. Now that we have it, we can actually create a component that we can use that service. So let's create a directory here for our components. So these are components. In our components, let's create a component that, let's see, where are we? That can allow us to register. So as source, app, components, and we're going to ng generate a component called user. Well, no, this is the register component. Okay. It's going to create the register component, and there it is, register component. It should have also declared it here. There it is, register component. It declares it in our modules. Right? Excellent. All right, so let's look at our register component. So our register component is going to use that user service we just created. So let's inject that. So this will be private the register service. No, I'm sorry, the user service we just created of type user service. And it's not asking me to import it. Did we declare it? I thought we did. Oh, there it is. It did load it already. Okay. And what we're going to do is that if somebody clicks on a register button, right, we want to generate a request. So for that, I believe I might already have it. Here's our register component. We're going to have a form that is going to listen in for username and password. And when they click on register, button, we want to listen in for an incoming. We want to generate a request. So we're going to say this.userService. We're going to call register, and we're going to pass in this username, this.username, and this.password. and then we're just gonna wait. We're just gonna wait for not wait. Subscribe to the response that comes in from the server, and presumably that will come with some status information about having some status information. Probably the user, hopefully. Subscribe. User. Why is a subscribe doesn't like me here? Subscribe. What is it saying? Subscribe does not exist in void. Really? User service. This user service register. Register is returning. Why? What doesn't it like? Maybe did we declare the HTTP module? Maybe we didn't declare the HTTP module. We did not declare the HTTP module. Okay, maybe that's it. Let's import the HTTP module. Okay. Oops. Let's import it here. HTTP module. Yes, that one. Okay. And register, and the register component is still complaining. Register. Registers this, register const this. Ooh, maybe return. We forgot to return that. Okay, that was it. I wasn't actually returning the promise, right? All right, great. All right, so once we have the user come back from the server, we would like to make that the current user. So to do that, we're going to add it to the shared service, which we need to inject. We don't have that actually. Let's inject that in the constructor. So this will be private shared service is of type shared service. Okay, and there it is. It imported it, and those quotes are annoying. So now that we have it, we can say this dot shared service user is that user we just came back from the server, right? And we're finally able to perhaps navigate to the profile page since we are currently logged in, but we don't have a profile page. So let's create one real quick. Let's create another component, and let's see, where are we? We are under register, so let's create a profile component. So ng generate a profile component. There it is. There's our profile component, and which presumably has been declared in the modules. Yes, there it is. There we go. And what we'd like to be able to do is navigate there, right? So to navigate there, we're going to need a router, which we don't have a router. We're going to navigate to the profile /profile. So we don't have a router, so let's inject that as well. So we'll here we have a little bit too many things being injected here. So private router, we'll need a router. Okay, did it import it? There it is. It did import it. Very good. Okay. All right, we got a router. And we can navigate to profile. And I think maybe this needs to be an array. There we go. Profile. All right, great. So we're done there. We need our template. Let's create our register template. Let's go to our HTML and let's replace this with HTTP with HTML template. It's complaining, I believe, that we don't have all the form. We can't use ng model because I believe we haven't declared the form modules. So let's do that. Let's go back to app modules and let's import that. Let's declare as an import form module, and there we go. We loaded it. There we go, and let's see. Okay, it's no longer complaining. All right, so let's. I want to see this register on the page. Before we do that, we actually need to be able to navigate to the register page, the register component. One easy way to do that, perhaps, is that in the default component HTML, we can just blow this away and just load our component, app.register component. Yes? So that if we just refresh this guy, it does not load. Wait, what? What is it complaining about? Console, a router. No provider for router. Oh, I think we need to add router. Router. Do we need to declare router in the module? Router. Oh, we don't have a routing. We never created a routing, right? So we need to create a routing, which I do not have here. Do I? I do not have routing here. Oh man. Thought I had it all here. Register. Really? I thought I had everything here. Oh, there it is. Okay, so let's create a route. Perhaps under here, we can create app routing. A new TypeScript. So this would be app.routing.ts. And in here, we'll create a couple of routers. Const app routes are routes. And we'll need to load that. And we'll need to declare that as our routes. App routes. And we'll need to load that as well. Router module. There we go. All right, awesome. And we might need to also load it. We might also need to load it in the app modules, right? Let me go fetch that. Slides, Google, and let's routing. There we go. This one. Let me grab here a quick example. Oh, there we go. Here we go. So we'll need router module, which I think we have already. Yeah, we have that. We have our const. That's it, right? Routes, and then we declare that in as an import. So let's go back to app modules and let's import it. Is that not what it's called? Routing? Did I not call it routing? I thought I called it app routing. Oh, did I put it in the wrong place? Okay, sorry. This was supposed to go, let's see, components. Not in components. It's supposed to go down here. There we go, in here. Okay, so app App routing. There we go. Okay. And we'll just import it right here. Routing. Routing. Excellent. All right, so we have that now. Let's see if this keeps complaining. All right, now we have our register. Right, that's routing. Okay. Actually, we don't want it to be at the upper level, right? Perhaps we want it to map to a / register, right, or a / login or / instead of being at the top level. So what we could do is that in our routing, we can create a route. Let's see, what do we want to map it to? Something like a register. Register goes to the register component. Register. Didn't I call it register component? Oh, did I just call it register? No, register component. Yeah, that's what I called it. Register component. There we go. There's a register component. There we go. So now the top level component, instead of being a just app register, this could be a, what is it? Router outlet, right? This could be a router outlet that we can map to whatever we want and then load register. There we go, right? So we map / register to that component. All right, great. So let's see. Are we ready to test it? Let's see. We're in the register component, and we click on register. It's going to go out to the service. It's presumably going to generate a post. Probably going to need to restart the server. Let's put a couple breakpoints to follow whether this is going to work or blow up. Maybe let's put a breakpoint right there. Maybe down here. Let's see if this works. So let's Alice and Alice. Let's register. All right, that's good, right? It came here to register, but looks like user's undefined. Something not good. Body came back as undefined. We probably forgot something on the server side. Oh, you know what? Probably we didn't configure body parser, right? The server probably doesn't know how to parse. But first of all, let's make sure that we generated a post. First of all, we did generate a post, and we did send. It looks like we did send the payload, right, with the username and password. So that's okay on the client side. But on the server side, probably we don't know how to parse the body. So let's configure that. Let's install. Let's see, where are we? Let's go back up a couple of directories, and let's do an npm install body parser. Right, that's going to install the library. And once we have that, we can configure body parser. And let's look at our cheat sheet from Express. And let's see how we configure it. Body parser. There it is. We're going to require body parser. Right, we're going to require body parser at the top here. Right, and we're going to configure that to parse JSON, because the body can really have tons of stuff in there, right? We don't know. In particular, we want to be able to parse JSON out of the body. Okay, let's try it again. Let's restart the server. And let's try posting this again. Okay, let's look at the user object. All right, looks like we do have a user object. Very good. Now I was able to parse the username and password that we're passing around, right? We were missing body parser. All right, so let's put a couple other breakpoints there. So hopefully this is when it creates the user. Also, let's put a couple breakpoints in the deserialize and the serialize. Let's create the user. Let's keep going. Let's continue. Okay, so it looks like it was successful. This is the user model that was created. it's stored under doc here, and we can see that it created a password, a username, a role, and an ID, right? Very good. And it's about to respond to the client. It's about to respond to the client. Let's continue. But notice before actually going out to the client, it gets intercepted by Passport. See that? And this is where Passport has the last word right before it goes out to it goes back to the client. The client still hasn't received notice that the client is still pending. See that? Still pending. Hasn't received any response yet from the client. So let's continue. And let's continue. And on the client, something happened here. Let's see what happened. On caught profile cannot match any routes to profile. So apparently we did not map the profile. Well, I wanted to navigate to the profile. We never mapped it there. So let's go out to the routing. And indeed, we never mapped the a route to the profile. Okay, so let's do that. So let's map it to profile, to the profile component, which I believe we did create it a bit earlier, right? And we'll need to load that. There it is. All right. Okay, let's try it again. Let's see if we go to profile. It says profile works, right? So we can log in, navigate there. But we really wanted to make sure that that happened when we registered, right? So we tried Alice. Let's try Bob. Register. Okay, went out. Continue. Continues, it serializes, and then sends the JSON back, right? And then it goes out to the profile. Let's make sure that this is actually being stored in Mongo. Let's see. Let's show DBs. So there's our new database that we created, right, that we're using. Let's use that database. Let's show the collections. And we have user models. I guess we never gave it a name for the schema, so it's using the default name, user models. So it would be db.usermodels.find. And we have two, Alice and Bob. Right? So we are able to register. That's great. Let's keep going. Let's now the other thing that we'd like to be able to do is log in. Now that we have users, let's log in next. Okay? And we'll do